Chris Needham, and I'm talking with Dr. Douglas Reeves, founder of the Leadership and Learning Centre in Boston. Douglas is author of Renewal Coaching, published by Jossie Bass, and more recently, Leading Change in Your School, published by ASCD. Douglas, I'm really interested in the concept of what we know about what actually impacts on changes in teacher professional practice.
Well, I did a very interesting study on this, and I looked at 81 separate teams of teachers and administrators trying to identify what specifically was the variable that most influenced changes in practice. And if you're looking for a good definition of leadership, by the way, it's not title, whether it's a union title or an administrative title or a board title. The real best definition, I think, of leadership is influence on the professional practices of teachers. So what are those sources? I wish I could report to you that the answer is an inspirational speech from me in a dark auditorium that turns out to be pretty close to dead last. Books and courses at the undergraduate and graduate level, those are interesting, but not even a country mile close to the number one source of influence. It's other teachers. The most important source of influence on teacher professional practice is the direct observation of other teachers. And as a result, one of the most important things we need to do in leadership is not just to have seminars and workshops. That is a piece of the puzzle. But we practice at the center where I work the 7-to-1 rule. For every 1 day of a seminar, 7 days in the school, deep implementation, practicing it, doing it, getting feedback on it. No pullouts, no holidays. The children are really present. I mean, honestly, when you think about what really influences the actions of any professional, it's the opportunity to model and get feedback. That's, of course, what coaching is all about. And that doesn't ever happen in the context of a typical large seminar. So it's a combination of forces that include the knowledge that's, to be sure, necessary but not sufficient. It also includes the application. And I think as professional developers, we've got to be willing to be in schools with our colleagues around real children. And way too much professional development doesn't include that. By the way, I just might observe that I was bragging on Australians just the other day at a major US conference where they were talking about all the voices we ought to be listening to and so proud of themselves for their stakeholder representation. And I said, well, you know who's not here, don't you? And they sheepishly look around and I said, well, children, right. And I told them about the Australian conference that you had where children were not only there, but they were sitting up front, actively participating, asking provocative questions of the keynoters. Now that's a model that the world ought to follow.
And in fact, we are using a lot of that student voice data in change in schools. Douglas, I want to pick up on the relationship that you drew between the leader's actions in supporting that professional practice in the classroom and the teacher practice as a follow-up to training. What would we see? You know, this model of an ideal leadership action in supporting the changes in teacher professional practice. What might we see, for instance? What might be here if we were watching and listening to this?
Before I add to the leader's to-do list, I think the cardinal principle of change is first you decide what you're not going to do. You can't just have a prescriptive program that gives someone more and more to do in the same amount of time with the same resources. So let's first define what that leader does not do. What they do not do is have a traditional faculty meeting with announcements. What they do not do is allow precious time that could have been spent on collaboration to be devoted instead to one more continuation of administrative announcements. So the first thing that they do is create time for new collaboration by deciding explicitly what they do not do. Secondly, they are a learning leader. I watched some interesting videotapes of what I thought were really good professional conversations. And what struck me was how little the principal spoke. The principal was not this person who was the faux staff developer just trying to lecture everyone to show that he or she was the smartest person in the room. They might have done 10% of the talking. And when they did speak, it was typically to question, to Socratically draw people out. And that's what I think is happening in these conversations. And the third thing that I think leaders are doing is they have very clear definitions of what effective collaboration is. It's not holding hands and singing songs. It's not even getting along. Collaboration can be difficult, contentious, hard work. But they define what does quality collaboration look like. For example, how much do we agree when we score student work together? They also define things that are of real interest to practicing classroom teachers, like if we get better at this, do we also get faster at it? Because the number one complaint of teachers is that we don't have the time to do all these things. So leaders are very attentive to helping teachers get better, get faster, and to creating time for them to be effective in the pursuit of improved professional learning.
Thank you.